Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Technology and Innovations track session. My name is John Mosier, and I am the co-track chair of this track, along with Josh Main. In today's session, we're going to learn about how flexible labor is changing warehouse operations and solving labor challenges. Our three speakers today: Karen Warren, Senior Manager, Joshua Tree Group; Nick Orefice, Human Resource Manager, Supply Chain with Advanced Auto Parts; and Mike Bohnett, Vice President of Sales and Partnership with Instawork. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
All right, thank you. It's an exciting topic, as we all know and love right now. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Hopefully you guys have a few takeaways when you leave this session. You'll be able to see how, or learn a little bit more about the evolving nature of the hourly workforce, identify some trends about what hourly workers need to be successful in the supply chain industry, and then hear about some flexible staffing strategies that are working for organizations like Advanced Auto Parts and some of the organizations that you work with, Karen, over at Joshua Tree Group. All right, so first thing, Mike here, I run partnerships at Instawork, and recently we ran a pretty significant study of the state of the hourly workforce. Every year we have millions of shifts that are posted and filled through our app, and which means that we have millions of workers on the app that are accepting shifts and working with organizations like Advanced Auto and many others across the US and Canada. And we gathered a lot of information about what is making these workers take shifts on our app, and then how they're thinking about flexible labor in today's environment. And so a couple of interesting factoids here. Certainly COVID has disrupted how we think about hiring and resourcing labor. And so we're seeing that individuals that work on these types of platforms, it's the fastest growing space, fastest growing segment in the US today. About 1 in 6 workers, hourly workers, have used an app-based system to find work, which is pretty significant. And so that number is growing pretty rapidly. And you can imagine if those folks that are using app-based systems, they're in an age group that is somewhat familiar with the App Store, and perhaps they're in line right now at the Apple Store waiting to get the new iPhone, whatever teen it is. But yeah, this populace is primarily the prime age of 25 to 44. So they're usually a little bit more tech savvy, which is why they're utilizing an app-based solution. The primary driver of what makes individuals use an app is actually the ability to choose their own schedule. They're looking for flexibility. So of all the workers that we surveyed across the country, 61% are actually using our app for flexibility. They don't have schedules that meet the fixed model that we're all used to, right? Those schedules that first shift, second shift, third shift. The way that we think about it is accessing a very, very large pool of talent at a very local level, and then assigning those individuals or having them choose the shifts that are most suitable to them. So it's essentially turning the model on its head. And lastly, we find that our labor force is more educated than the traditional hourly workforce. 96% have graduated high school or have a GED. About 61% have taken secondary courses in college. And so what you find here are individuals that have different motivations. And so it's certainly evolving. The workforce is evolving. And so what we'll talk about today are how organizations are thinking about flexible labor, because whether it's with our company or you are probably here because you're trying to figure out how to make flexibility work for your organization. It's not going away, right? This is where the trends are headed. So hopefully we can talk about how you're thinking about it today, and ask some of our guests here around how they're organizing their organizations. Well, that's redundant, but around flexible labor. Nick and Karen, what are some of the changes you've seen in the supply chain hourly workforce since the last time, or this time last year?
What we had to do really quick, we started partnering with Instawork prior to COVID. And for me, I can tell you the whole story afterwards if you want to speak to me about it. But what we learned really quick as COVID kind of started, we had to get out of the traditional mindset. And I'm sure you guys have all heard that, right? And the hardest thing was really trying to educate our people leaders around the 40-hour, 8-hour day work week. It's no longer there. And that was probably the hardest thing as an HR partner, to really lean in from our perspective to re-educate that workforce. To understand that, the days of your mom and dad's family members that worked at a company for years, it's gone. So really quick, we had to dig into how do we utilize it? Do we use traditional staffing, which we still use, but in probably less than 100 words. When we were introduced to Instawork, it was a pilot, and I think I told this story, so I can tell it. And myself and the GM, we were on a call. We were the first of the company to use this through 40-something distribution centers, and I was like, this is never going to work. And so we went through it ended up not being a pilot. We actually put live jobs out there, and within less than 20 minutes, we had people hitting our jobs. And so we learned really quick that we were on to something. The Instawork team was on to something and educated us, but the hard part was actually managing our team of managers, frontline supervisors, to understand you're not going to meet these people. They're all coming through an app, so you're not going to have that firsthand knowledge walking around. But it was amazing to see people that actually had experience, and looking at their stories and being able to show their stories to our managers, that these are people who have somehow found out a way to live their life and manage their life by working, whether it's 1 week at a time, a month at a time, or as you guys call it, a gig at a time. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little more. So that was probably the neatest thing for us. And today we still have to utilize and train and develop our management to understand that the traditional hiring and planning your day based on X amount of head count, and for you operators, you know where I'm going, how many cases you have to get out, what's your PPH and CPH, that's still there, but now you have to manage it on shifts and ebbs and flows of what your business are.
I think for me and my clients, one of the things that I notice changing the most is that people are very aware that they have options. And with COVID, I feel like post-COVID, are we post-COVID? I never know. Life is more and more and more complex all the time. And so people want to explore what options they have, and they're actually asking themselves, what options do I need? So, if you're a single mother and you are the person who needs to drop your child off at school, you're going to look for a scenario that doesn't have a 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift time, but actually allows you to go, I have this thing that I need because my life is complex. Which of all the options I have right now, because everyone wants my labor hour, which of these options helps me address how complex my life is? The paycheck is no longer enough. We need a paycheck that also fits into the complexity of our ever-changing lives today, kind of in this era we're in.
Yeah, it aligns to a lot of the findings that we're seeing from our workforce. How do you get your operators or the organizations that you work with bought into that, adjusting how they think about timing, or they think about their schedules to fit into that mom that needs to drop off her kids?
Yeah, at our organization, we help companies implement labor management programs that gives leaders more tools. So the biggest thing we saw is that leaders just really, really need tools that help them react to their business and know their business. And so you can have scenarios where they're going, okay, I still have to get this much work out the door today in order to meet my customers' needs. But instead of doing it with 20 people that I have for a 10-hour shift, how can I collaborate not just in these walls, but with a workforce that's outside these walls to still get the same amount of productivity? And then in labor management, you can also say, do I actually need as many people for as many hours? So I'm working with a client right now who is realizing that if they can get the front half of their day really, really productive, they can let people work after they've earned 8 hours worth of productivity. If somebody is a high performer and they do that in 6 hours, they got 8 hours worth. They got an 8-hour shift out of that person because they're a high performer. Safety, accuracy, and performance. And so we've given them tools to measure those things and know, okay, that person has given me 8 hours worth of effort, and now I have the freedom to be flexible with their lives. And so it's really looking at your business, recognizing that you're still running a business, but getting really creative with the tools and how you look at the same thing. To your point, getting away from that traditional mindset, this many people for this many hours equals this many cases, but saying, how can we listen more and invite people into, here's what we need to do together, how can we go and do it?
Yeah, no, not much more to add. I mean, I think you said it there. I think it's understanding your business and understanding where your pain points are, and being able to critique your schedules through the Instawork program and being able to attain people. And sometimes it's people who have never stepped foot into a warehouse. I mean, we've understood that. How many of us are hiring people that have worked in a warehouse or supply chain 5 to 6 years? It's just not there anymore. What are you looking for? You're looking for strong work history. And even then, the years of somebody being somewhere for 3, 4, 5 years is not there anymore, right? So you're really looking at what their history is, but more of, and it doesn't have to be like business, but it can be, where they came from, what their work ethic is, and what we've enjoyed about partnering with Instawork on this is, and I don't know if we're going to get into this, is I always call it the Uber, and I hate saying that, but it is the Uber. What's really nice is the partners who select our gigs get to grade us. And it's really neat because we grade them, they grade us. And so it really pushes us as a customer to make sure that you always hear companies say, we want to be the employer of choice. Well, this is another outlet to where we have to make sure we're treating individuals, whether they come in from traditional staffing or Instawork, we want to make sure we're building that culture and we're adding into it, because at the end of the day, your folks are actually giving us a grade, and that grade is out there. And what does that do? That helps recruit without us having to do a thing, but what we have promised individuals that come work for us to do. So I know you'll probably talk a little bit more of that, but that's what I enjoy about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's accountability on both sides, right? You're rating the professionals, which then either get added to your roster and you see time and time again, or the opposite, which is now they're rating you, which probably didn't exist with traditional staffing. How does that mindset, that because your team knows that they're rating, how does that affect your frontline leaders and how they operate?
Yeah, again, a little bit about my history. I worked in the staffing industry for several years as I kind of continued my growth and development. And I remember when I first started, it was, we don't need them. There was really not that. They'd call me and say, hey, we don't need these people anymore. Now it's, you have to look at whether it's a full-time hire or if it's a contract hire or if it's a gig hire, you have to treat them all the same, because they're the ones selling your business. They're the ones who are posting on the internet, and anybody who's in HR, if there's anybody in there, I'm scrubbing those sites all the time, right? We want to make sure there's nothing bad being said about there. Well, now you've got live individuals who have went through your hiring processes, have went through your training processes, and have physically done the work for a certain amount of time frame. And if you can make that time frame as enjoyable as anybody wants to work in a 100-degree warehouse with no air conditioner in the middle of summer, if you can build that case for that individual, say, hey, we want you to come back when you're available, they're going to sell the company for you. And again, that's what we're trying to do. How do we get our information, any one of us or companies, how do you get that out there? How do you get that positive image in there so people are coming to apply for you?
Are you seeing anything in terms of how you're educating your operators and how to think differently around culture?
Yeah. Talking about the grading in the app, I actually think that like performance and workflow, all of those things are supposed to be a two-way conversation. So, I work with companies where you still have a very industrial revolution, command and control leadership model, and trying to teach leaders how to make performance a two-way conversation where I, as an employee, can come to my leader and say, I have this obstacle that's preventing me from being successful, and that I believe that leader is going to go action it. So not just it might end up on an app and be very public grading, but how do we create this culture where we're all invested in the performance that we can achieve together? For me, as a general warehouse worker, my leader cares about me being successful, and my leader is inviting me into the broader mission of the business at the same time. And so I can bring an obstacle, and I know that they're going to bring me feedback as well, and you're creating this culture of, here's what it takes to be successful. Oh, awesome, this is what's keeping me from being successful. Oh, okay, let me fix that for you because I want you to go be successful. And it's, you get rid of the us versus them, and you're one team driving toward the mission together because everyone understands what it is.
Yeah. Nick, you said earlier, this is never going to work, which you can imagine being on the front line, bringing new businesses to the folds. We hear this a lot. And one of the concerns that most operators, organizations have is like fear that you're going to train people and they're going to be gone and they're never going to come back again. So how do you think about augmenting your training to actually fit a wider variety of individuals that perhaps end up not coming back again, or perhaps you need to come back to their own schedule? Have you made any changes?
I know obviously when we first started using Instawork, the pilot was really supposed to be for projects, right? So very short-term projects. What we found out really quick, COVID hit, we needed long-term people. And so as we started using individuals that came through the app, we knew really quick that we had to include them in the fold. We had to make sure they felt like they were part of the team, to the point where we actually had some long-term folks coming in that had worked for us month after month after month, and actually I would call repeat customers, right? So they were pretty open up front with us saying, hey, I can work until here. We got to that point and we were like, we'd really love you to come back. And they're like, yep, I'll be back. I've got a vacation plan and I'll come back. And so again, as we look at the non-traditional sense, it's now we have to start being flexible to our own folks, whether we're using Instawork folks or our own. We've got to understand that we can no longer dictate our schedule needs. We have to dictate the schedule of our workers, understanding that, there's certain cutoff times and stuff that we have to set, but now we have to kind of look at what part of our business from an operational standpoint do we have to flex, whether it's shipping stuff on a certain day, whether it's shipping stuff twice a day, and again, we know transportation being the most expensive cost, that's a little bit on our will, but we have to look at the flexibility, not only with the hourly, but we're actually starting to see that within our management too, of a non-traditional sense of, I grew up in a world of weekend shifts and all these other shifts, and we've got to start looking at maybe it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday shift. Again, you've got to have your management buy into it, and you have to I think you have to look at your business and make sure that there's what's the word I'm looking for? There's some synergy, that everything is connecting it, but at the end of the day, we're at a point now, and I hate saying this way, we need everybody that comes in. So we are at the will of the people, and I will say that. But that's a good thing, because I think it makes us think outside the box and different ideas. So, and we could talk and talk and talk about this.
Karen, what do you see as some of the most important traits companies that do a really good job with onboarding? What are some of the similarities that Nick is speaking to, or something perhaps that he's missing?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, it starts with learn their names. That's a really good trait of somebody who wants somebody to stick around. It can't be, hey, the guy in the gray shirt in door 108 needs a pair of gloves. You mean Nick? So I know that's hard, and I've been in operations and I consult for warehouses. A few weeks ago, I threw on a t-shirt and was out helping because they had 15 temps start in one day and they needed support. And so I know that it is hard, but I think at the most basic level, learn people's names. I think the next is just clearly communicating what it takes for that person to be successful, but also recognizing that people are coming in with gaps. You've got people coming in who might not have any distribution warehouse knowledge. And so I remember the first time I walked into a distribution center, I almost felt silly for never thinking about how my stuff actually got to me. It's a good thing I wasn't expected to work in that environment in that day because I don't know, but those are some of the people who are coming to us. They've worked in food service and this is their first time in a warehouse, and I'm asking them to actually contribute in that warehouse. And so clearly communicating what success looks like, but also identifying what are the places we can put people in the business today where they can be successful with a really low learning curve. So am I going to make that person a receiver who's in charge of accurate inventory? No, probably not. I'm going to probably start them in a job function that is a little simpler. If all of your job functions are hard to train somebody on, you should probably be partnering with your engineering or your training teams to simplify them. Getting people into a place where they can be successful, have an early win, and clearly communicating what success looks like is important. And then I mentioned it already, but avoiding an us versus them mentality. That's really, really important to me. People need to know they matter to the business. And so, yeah, and one I know we've talked about a ton is just who's my point of contact today? It can't probably be a leader. If a leader, when you influx a bunch of new people, particularly during peak, I'm sure many people in this room are marching toward peak. If you're influxing a bunch of new people, a leader probably isn't going to hit all those people in a day. So if you've told me what it takes for me to be successful, you've put me in a place where I can be successful and have an early win, who can I talk to if I am struggling? Is it a mod lead where, hey, Karen, you've got 3 temps starting in your area today. I want you at the top of every hour to just do a loop, check on them. It's going to be about 5% of your day that you're going to give to these 3 people, but the payoff for them being successful and being engaged is that much higher. So those are things I see kind of tactically, but also just culturally around hearing their name. Yeah.
And if I can add into that, I think you're right because, when I get in front of people, I sometimes lose their direction. So, but you said it, like, I will speak from our view of Advanced Auto Parts and how we've managed it is, we have set up our account. It explains what that is, but you're right. How many younger people actually read all that? They're just like, money. Oh, I want that job. I want those hours. It works perfect. First day they even come in, it's 3 hours. So I don't want, from our perspective, we thought originally it was this, as soon as somebody comes to work, you put them to work. And we learned, no, it's not that. So, we have built a program around all of our contractors that come in, that they're coming in, they're spending 2 to 3 hours in training before they're even hitting the floor. And so again, trying to make sure they feel comfortable what they're doing. So they're going to continue to show back up. So again, I don't want to, Mike, sorry about this. I don't want you guys to think you use them and they show up and they're like, here. There's still those processes that you have to follow as a company to make sure that, they understand what they're going to be doing. And there's some cases where, we've had people say, this isn't for me. And again, no sweat off our back. I would rather somebody be open in front with us and not waste our time. Right. And we part ways. But most of the people come in, I think, if you show them what you're doing, you show them you care for them when they come in, that's how you start building that culture.
Yeah.
How do you build that culture, though, of not us versus them, right? Because sometimes when you are full-time Advanced Auto, you're thinking this is the help, right? And you mentioned earlier that once you have that, then it permeates into how they speak to the teams. It can still create some divides. So how do you think through that and speak and practically train your own team members?
I'll speak open and honest and transparent. Probably going to be my downfall is how many of you guys work for companies that need a lot of people? We all do. So at the end of the day, I think our team members understand that this is not something that we're using to get rid of them. It's something that we're using to help them. And so we have to get them to buy in it too, not our supervisors, but we also have to get our hourly team members, our trainers and all that to understand when somebody comes in on a gig, it can be short-term or be long-term, but it's got to be meaningful. And so if to your point, not one person needs to manage this. It's not only the management, it's the hourly employees. So we've got hourly trainers that are involved. We have hourly leads that are involved. So everybody is touching these individuals as they come in to make sure they have a positive experience.
My background is in anthropology, and I studied how cultures are made and how cultures are changed. So now that I am a change agent for cultures, it's a perfect fit. But one of the things that's interesting about culture is that it hides itself from the people who are a part of it. And so talking about not having an us versus them culture, the unfortunate thing is that it already exists. It exists in every building I've been in my career, an us versus them culture. So it's not so much about not having one, it's about actually choosing to break the fact that it exists today. And I think that the way that you do that is by starting to talk about, we don't want to have us versus them. So, and it starts at the top, senior leadership talking to floor level leaders about, we can't execute our business without these people. They're important here. And so how do we start to actually help communicate to them, in how we treat them? And then those floor line leaders reiterating that to the full-time team members, we need their help. We appreciate your investment in their success. And then you recognize and reward the effort required to make one team along the way. Most people just, in my experience, most people just want to hear, like, we know it's hard. And we recognize that to have an area full of temps requires more effort for our tenured people. But I think the way that you, instead of just building a one team culture, we're actually having to break us versus them cultures. And you just have to call it what it is and communicate about it and say, we're going to be different and here's how. And that's different for every single company because it depends on how hard it is. But it starts by recognizing that you have a problem.
Yeah, you speak a lot about empathy and building empathy within the organization. Do you have any advice for folks that are thinking about how to infuse more of that into their business?
Yeah. I think the best way to teach people how to be empathetic is to be empathetic toward them. So when I have a leader that I'm trying to train and I want them to do something different, and they go, I can't because of X, Y, or Z. Okay, those are your obstacles that now we have a responsibility to remove. So the best way to teach a leader how to engage people as people is to engage them as people. The best way to teach a full-timer how to engage a temp as someone who really matters is to engage that full-timer as someone who really matters. And so I don't know if there's like one recipe that I have. I don't think there's a silver bullet. But the thing that COVID taught me and reminded me the most is that life is really hard. And warehouse operations are really hard. This is hard work that we're talking about, asking our people to do. And when we talk about the labor challenge and we talk about engaging people, I think it starts with going, oh, these are all whole and complete people whose mothers may have just died, or who are struggling with medical bills, or all of these things that we don't see because we don't talk about them all the time. And so I think it just starts with looking at the person in front of you that you need to help today and going, hey, here's what I need from you. Let me listen to why you think that might be challenging, help you remove those roadblocks so that I am modeling for you how to go do that for others.
Yeah, that's a better answer than I'm.
So the changes in the labor market have forced people to think outside of the box. That's why we're here today. We're looking at other ways to resource and allocate local labor. Are there any other groups or any other places that you found have been helpful for organizations to think about different types of cultures, or bringing in different types of cultures that are probably a significant size working group at a local level that you've seen work as well?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit, and if I talk too much about this, let me know. One of the things we talked about, it was a huge initiative for Advanced Auto Parts, was persons with disabilities. I actually piloted out in Denver at my DC out there, and then started doing it here in Nashville, and I believe we've got 16 distribution centers right now that are hiring persons with disabilities. It's amazing, and I apologize not being prepared, the amount of workforce that's out there. Does anybody know? I see some faces that popped up. I mean, it's a pretty large untapped workforce. And so what we've recognized is by working with individuals with a disability is it really gives you an opportunity to service your local town. And I usually get emotional when I talk about this, and we talked about this, it's a different type of hiring, so you're not hiring an individual, you're hiring a family, because I can tell you anytime we bring a person in with a disability, I'm bringing mom in, I'm bringing dad in, we're touring the facility, we're doing the hiring. And once you find individuals who want to come work again, I know you shook your head a minute ago when I said 100-degree warehouse. It's you want to make sure that they're used to the atmosphere, and we're building a culture around it. So we've done that. Obviously, I think we talked about, I know we've hired a lot of refugees here in Tennessee, and it's just continuing, and it all goes back to what I said earlier. It's building your name out there in the community as an employer of choice. We're not perfect, but I think if you continuously look at outlets, various outlets, and you put your best foot forward as a company, and at least people are out there advertising for you, because that's another thing. Somebody asked me the other day, they were like, do you advertise on the radio? I was like, no, I can't remember the last time I put a newspaper ad in there, because I hate to say this, it's I hope nobody in here is from social media, old social media. It's not worth the bang for the buck, right? What we've learned really quick, it's word of mouth, right? It really is, and it's your employees, whether they're contractors, whether they're Instaworkers, whether they're persons with disabilities. Again, they're going to be the voice of your business out in the community.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of groups, persons of disabilities. You talked about that. I think that's incredible. We were in a session this morning where they're actually designing warehouse operations intentionally to be able to engage that workforce, which is great to see, great to hear. There's a lot of opportunity around refugees and immigrants. There's obviously a lot of people who came in after Afghanistan, and their resettlement support is ending, and so a lot of them are looking for work right now. If you're local here to the Nashville area, there are some incredible nonprofits that are helping with transitioning people from resettlement into the workforce. My first career was in nonprofit. I actually know there are nonprofits like that around the country. I used to work with one of them in Atlanta. There's great companies that are helping, can connect you to them, so you don't have to do all the legwork. There's also going to be millions of refugees from Ukraine, and so I would highly recommend getting up to speed on what their work authorization process is going to be. Depending on how the government chooses to handle that, anywhere from 6 to 18 months from now, those people are going to be looking to enter the workforce, depending on the resettlement and the work authorization process. So there are challenges related to learning how that's going to work, but there's a lot there for refugees. I really also have a big passion for what is being termed the second chance workforce. So people who may have a criminal record, and they are transitioning out of their repayment of that debt to society, and they need work. People who are transitioning out of rehabilitation programs for drug abuse or domestic violence recovery, sex trafficking recovery. There are individuals who kind of societally, culturally are told they are not enough, that if they can find a place where that doesn't have to hold them back from being successful in building a career, their loyalty to an employer is very, very high. And so we've implemented that strategy. And then based on where you're at, there's some really scrappy, kind of more comical solutions. Up in Chicago, we have a client who In the wintertime, when they have their peak, they hire landscapers who can't do any landscaping in negative 22-degree weather. And so that's almost exclusively where they get their peak staffing from. People whose job ends for a season, they integrate them into their warehouse for a season, and then they go back to landscaping in that beautiful Chicago spring. And so there's a lot of really scrappy ways.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you talk about referrals. It's the way that we recruit as well. 98% of our workforce actually comes from word of mouth, which is the best way to recruit, right? So, well, maybe one last question for you all before we open it up to everyone else. If the audience members here were interested in starting with a flexible labor solution, more tech-focused labor solution, what sort of advice would you give them when it comes to how to think about getting started?
I'll go back to we were kind of told. We were told you're doing this, and I'll tell you, I go back to what I said earlier. Myself and the GM we were literally told we were going to do this, and then we did it. And like I said, within minutes we got off the call. Him and I sat there and we were just like, okay, we'll see. This isn't going to work. And I promise you this day, 20 minutes later, all 5 of our gigs were filled. They all showed, and then we were just in amazement. So it happened so quick, we had to learn really quick how to get our rest of our team involved. Okay, wait, what are we going to do for training? What are we going to do for this? So I would say the first thing is make sure that the groundwork is set and that you're prepared, because it's going to happen pretty quick, I think, because people, to your point, there's a lot of work out there. And so I think if you can use this is going to sound like a plug, but it really isn't. But I think if you can get it out there online and put as much information out there and be transparent of what you're looking for. People are hungry. People are looking for different things. Good story, my mom has just got put in a nursing home, and I heard some of the CNAs say, I can't do this anymore. And so I was talking to one of them, and I said, have you ever thought about going to a warehouse? I said, and they were like, yeah, we actually have. So I think people are looking for opportunities out there, but I'd say the biggest thing is make sure that you guys you're prepared, your companies are willing to put the time and the effort in, because if you just kind of throw it out there and you, just like anything else, it's going to fail. So you've got to have everybody to buy it, and you've got to have the structure set before you actually kind of flip the switch.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. I think that for me, there's 2 things. One, your operators can't do it all by themselves. So you need to get all your stakeholder groups together to address the need that we have in terms of labor. Training, engineering, systems, onboarding, HR, all of it. Operators can't do it alone. We're already asking our operators to do a lot. And so operators can't do it alone. Let's get all stakeholder groups together to talk about how are we gonna solve this? What's our new strategy gonna be? The second is knowing what you actually need. And so improving your planning tools, looking at how your rates or your engineered standards, your volume, what tools leaders have available to say, I only need 2 people tomorrow. Because if they don't know that, they're gonna say, I need 10, and you're bringing in 10 and you're trying to manage 10, but you really only needed 2. And so that's one of the best things you can do for your operators, is look at what tools and resources do they have to help them more specifically know their business, engage the associates that are in the building, and drive the results that we need. Because if it is a number that they don't believe in, or a process that they can't manage or update, they're going to be out of control, and inevitably they're just going to throw bodies at the work, which isn't really helping anyone.
Great. Well, thank you so much.